go.
How are you?
Welcome to the April 12th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. In accordance with the Town Board's adoption of Local Law Number 14 of 2022, the Board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the Town Clerk's Agendas and Meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, please click the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and hamlet of residence for the record. Thank you. Now please rise as we salute the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What is your pleasure on the minutes of March 22nd, 2023?
Move to accept.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearings, A021097, Dilip Patel and Sibyat Kaur Dillon. The applicant requests an adjournment to 6/26/23. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on this application before we adjourn it?
Well, 6/26, the calendar says 6/28.
Well, we're only going to meet once that week, I can assure you.
I caught that.
All right, so let's adjourn that to 6/28.
Move to adjourn to 6/28.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A022044, Michael Hausman.
Anything new, Catherine?
I do have one letter from the engineer.
Okay, but surveys and stuff are.
There's a
Yep.
new, isn't this new stuff in
There's
here?
a second new plan.
It's all in.
Okay. Just submitted, I think they were submitted April 6th. They're in the main file. So, should be about 3 separate sets of plans. There's also a narrative by the applicant describing the plan modifications.
Thanks, Fran. Why, sir?
Excuse me for being late.
Good evening. Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning. I'm here tonight with Michael and Irina Hausman. We had talked about this last, I believe, in February. So at the last meeting, the board had tasked us with a couple of things. This is an application for demolition of the existing residence and construction of a new two-story, single-family residence. And we had originally proposed a detached accessory barn. So at the last meeting, we were tasked with re-review of that detached accessory structure that was shown originally on the south side of the property. About originally 10 feet off the property, we had relocated it to about 20 feet off of the property originally at the last meeting. We were also asked to re-review the drainage structures that were proposed for the residents and to further reduce the amount of fill that we had shown at the last meeting, which was close to about 1,200 cubic yards. And we were asked to look into redesign of a naturally vegetated wetlands, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer for the property, designating areas for use by the owners for their garden areas and their pet chickens, and also to maintain an area to access the existing swimming pool and deck that is proposed to remain on the site. So a lot of thought went into some redesign of the project, and what is before you right now is our redesign of the orientation of the residence, combining an attached garage instead of a detached accessory barn. If you look at this site plan, we're showing here the same residence as proposed, just slightly reoriented such that the entire residence will meet a 75-foot setback from all of the wetland boundary that's shown in this dark blue here around the lot. This setback here is a 75-foot setback. So you can see here that the entire structure with a roof would be located 75 feet from that wetland setback. Only 152 feet of the proposed deck, which has not changed in dimensions from the previous iteration, is shown at less than 75 feet, and 20 square feet of a stairway to access a proposed deck, to access a small studio space above the proposed garage, would be within that 75-foot setback. We had the architect draw this up for us so that we could have this for discussion purposes. Once we finalize these plans, they would then go to the surveyor to be put onto a survey. We also are showing on this site plan a comparison of the buffer sketch that was done by Marty Shea, which is highlighted here in a gray hatching. And there's calculations to show that Mr. Shea's buffer was 10,808 square feet. This green area is the buffer that we're showing that the Hausmans would be willing to give for native planting on the property. So it allows for a designated garden area, relocation of their chicken coop behind the house, as well as a chicken run area just behind the house. And then this sort of corridor here in front of the house to be able to get around in the event that there's a need for repair and or reconstruction of this swimming pool, or demolition and redoing of this pool in the future, which was something we had discussed at the prior meeting. So the square footage of this buffer, which was something the board wanted us to bring to them, is a total of 8,034, almost 8,035 square feet, which is 26% of the upland area of the property. And it's actually a 26% difference, ironically, between Marty's buffer and our buffer. So that's two of the changes. So with the change of making the garage an attached structure, it's pulling it back on the one corner as far as almost 22 feet from the neighbor's property, which was a concern. The rest of the structure is further than that 22-foot setback. We're also showing some evergreens that would be planted as a buffer between the adjacent property, which was also a concern. With the change in angle of the house, we were also able to change the orientation of the driveway and the sanitary. So the sanitary system has some more area because the driveway can kind of move a little bit to the north. We have this kind of a sweeping driveway. We had a circular drive here previously to accommodate the septic tank, and the leaching area was kind of pigeonholed down in this corner. So there's a little bit more area to kind of pull it away from the neighbor and that low spot in the corner and minimize the fill that would need to be put there for the septic. What else? Because of the change in the garage and adding it to the house, there's a dramatic change in the amount of drainage that's necessary. The engineer did some research, and the Coltech drainage could actually be brought down about 6 inches from what they had originally planned. This is all laid out in that letter that I submitted, both from me and the engineer. So with that being the absolute minimum that they could reduce the height of the drainage, that could allow for some further reduction in the amount of fill. So with less drainage and less need for fill because of that change in the elevation need for the drainage, we actually reduced the fill tremendously from just under 1,200 cubic yards to 527 cubic yards overall. And of that number, the engineering office determined that 404 cubic yards is absolutely necessary to elevate the house to the required level to get the invert necessary for the sanitary system at elevation 6. So the majority of that fill is required for the sanitary system. The remainder is for a slight elevation in the first floor to elevation 7 to do some grading just in this middle area to provide for additional parking underneath the residence. So that's basically the gist of everything. As I said, the engineer could not be here tonight, but his letter here outlines all of these items in more detail. But basically that's the gist, is that for the 2-foot separation to groundwater, the highest expected groundwater, the fill is necessary for that septic to reach that minimum 6-foot elevation in the topography. And then the stormwater, they did speak with the town engineer with regard to the drainage in their replanning of this. And that's where some of this planning did come in handy with Tom Houghton. So they did have a collaboration with him in their redesign. So this is a significant change in what we had originally proposed, And I believe that that was the main issue, was the fill, as far as Marty's concerns with the project overall. And we just really needed to iron out the buffer as far as the board's concerns otherwise, in my view. So this is what we have. Do you have any questions?
Yes. The picture, the green on the lower picture, it shows color-coded the amount of fill, approximate amount of fill, and where it's going to be located. And the engineer letter said that most of the fill is required for the septic system, yet most of the fill is actually going around the house, under the house and garage and slightly outside of that, and not much is shown for the septic system. So I don't understand the colors and corresponding with the letter. It seems like it's not consistent.
They need to raise the house up to elevation 6 to get the proper invert elevation for the sanitary system.
Is that house going to be on pilings?
No, the house will not be on pilings. This is not in a VE flood zone. It's in an AE flood zone, so it will be a concrete, a precast concrete wall foundation with hydrostatic openings, which is what would be required in an AE flood zone. We are not south of the limit of moderate wave action, or seaward, I guess you would say. The limit of moderate wave action is here, and we're pretty close to it. So the need for the elevation of the house is to accommodate what's required by the health department for the invert of the septic system.
Okay. But typically, if you're going to use concrete foundation, does that mean you want to bring the fill up to the foundation, so there's not much foundation showing? Is that why you want a lot of fill? Because you can put concrete piers and concrete foundation down as low as you want and put the house as high as you want. It doesn't affect the fill.
Well, this is what they're telling me is required for the house.
Okay.
I'm not an engineer.
The other question is also one that I would have asked the engineer if he would have been here. And that is, in the last discussion we had when you were here before, the engineer testified that the fill was necessary under the house in order to accommodate the Cultec drains. And he did a calculation of the installation criteria for specifications for those Cultec drains required some amount of gravel under them. And his calculation was based on 2 feet above groundwater is where that gravel has to start. And I question whether that was necessary. Rather than look at the top of the gravel where the water is going to actually touch as it starts to filter through. And he doesn't address that in the letter. I recognize you may not be able to answer that question, but I think we should have that question answered.
Well, we do have the revised plans from the engineer that show the drainage structures. So they're showing What are they showing? They're showing 12 inches of gravel below the drainage structure. They're showing it 2 feet above groundwater, which is also a requirement of the DEC, which is what Paul is stating in his letter, that he's also trying to satisfy the New York State DEC in addition to this board.
And the DEC weighs in on this one, on this application?
Yes, yes. And we did receive a letter from them asking for this information. I have not yet responded to them because I figured there wasn't a reason until I finished with you, with your board, so that I could send them something.
Did you submit this to them yet?
No.
Okay. When you do, you might put those Coltech drains at a location that calculates the top of the gravel to be 2 feet above the water and see what they say. You'll get your answer that way.
Well, he's showing wait, say that again? The top of the drains, 2 feet above?
The Coltech drain is a plastic
Right.
dome of
Yes.
sorts. And the specifications call for it to be installed on top of gravel, apparently a
Right.
foot of gravel, with a filter cloth underneath the gravel or on top of the gravel?
I thought that he had said under the gravel.
Okay. So he looks at that gravel and plastic dome as one integrated unit and does his calculation of having that whole system 2 feet above groundwater. What I'm suggesting is, especially due to the very sandy nature of this property, Plymouth profile, then what would it look like if he installed that gravel and the Coltech so that the Coltech itself was 2 feet above groundwater, thereby reducing the necessary fill by a foot? It seems like, engineering-wise, it would be quite suitable. But then again, I don't understand why the DEC requires certain things. They would have to speak to that.
Well, so the areas under the house are acting as a sort of basement. They're not living space, but they're acting as a sort of a basement. In the event that this were a house with a full foundation, instead of two areas of foundation, and then these are steel beams that would be holding up the middle of the house. If this were one solid foundation, as a typical house would be, this would be a basement with hydrostatic openings. The Hausmans are opting to have this as a workshop and a storage area that would not be living space. They would basically be acting like a basement to the house. So they would like to have this at elevation 7 so that it's less prone to flooding than it would be at a lower elevation.
Okay, that's all new testimony and a whole different reason for adding the fill under the house.
Well, that's part of it, but also, according to the engineer, we need to be at 6 for the septic. And I wish he was here so that he could help me.
Well, let's not dwell on this much longer because I don't think we have all the information we need. And we might not need more information anyway. But I do have one other question that I didn't understand on this. This is your drawing, and it has a Chicken Run, 2,063 square feet. Where is that located and what is it for? I have never heard of a Chicken Run.
Well, I think that that's this part of this area here.
Okay,
And the owners could probably clarify that a
and that's
little
gonna be
more.
fenced, I presume?
I'm not sure what the plan is specifically for that.
Okay,
Maybe the owners can address that. Were there any other questions that maybe I can answer?
I do.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I have had an opportunity to review the revised plans, and they're excessive for this environmentally sensitive site, and as such, they need to be further modified. First, understand that the applicant is seeking approval of significantly less wetland building and buffer setbacks than required by code. The minimum mandated setbacks are 100 feet for construction. The building plans fall just shy of 75 feet at their closest point. And the code also mandates that a buffer 75 feet in width be established. The applicant is proposing a buffer of 45 feet in width, which is obviously 30 feet less than what's required. So to start, there's certainly a need to expand upon the buffers at this site. That's the reason why my initial sketch had a greatly increased scope of buffer to try and provide for an average overall buffer consistent with the code requirement of 75 feet. Deposition of fill is a regulated activity pursuant to Section 325-6 of the code, and it is because it poses the potential for adverse impacts to wetlands. One of the greatest concerns with properties in the FEMA designated flood zones is that excessive fill deposition can interfere with natural flooding and drainage patterns, thereby changing the direction of flood surges, increasing the height of the water level, and displacing floodwaters onto other proximate properties. You can better understand that if you just think about a glass of water. You start putting rocks in that water, the level of the water increases. Or if you go to the beach and you create a mound of sand, while the wave is coming in, it will swirl around that sand, usually at a faster rate. And the greater amount of that water will travel further landward. So placement of fill always changes the natural flooding and drainage patterns, and can adversely impact wetland ecosystems as well as neighboring properties, increasing the risk of flood damage to proximate homes and properties. The placement of fill is not necessary to raise the house. The house can be structurally elevated to conform with all FEMA standards. The fill is also not necessary for the purposes of the on-site drainage. I also had a discussion with the town engineer in which he indicated that when you go in with a Coltech system, you only need to provide a separation from groundwater of a foot or less, particularly when you're dealing with a very sandy site, which is the case with the subject property. Another option that the landowner can look at is trench drains. Essentially what trench drains are you dig trenches, you put in perforated pipe, you put rocks in those trenches. Those trenches can go around the residence, thereby providing for significant dispersion of the runoff over a large area. So it's Coltech systems plus the placement of significant quantities of fill is very costly. So there are options that would not only be better in terms of less environmental impacts, but would be less costly for the applicant. If you look at that fill plan, you can see that the mounded area beneath and around the house, within the parameters of that area, the existing grades would be increased by about 1.5 feet to over 2 feet. If the Coltech plans allow for a less separation from groundwater, the Coltech systems can virtually be installed on this site without grade modifications or fill deposition. Yes, fill is necessary for the purposes of raising the sanitary system and for that connecting septic line to the house. But the fill does not need to be placed under all of the planned construction and accessory structures for the purposes of elevating those structures. Currently we're looking at a ground floor footprint, which is about 2,700 square feet, which in light of the wetland constraints for this property would certainly appear to be excessive. The applicant is indicating that they want to be permitted a 6-foot wide access path around the existing raised pool deck and pool, which is certainly contrary to the standards of this board and is not necessary on this property. The pool was actually constructed prior to the effective date of Chapter 325, but without the requisite state title wetland permits. As a consequence of that, the matter had to be settled with the state through an administrative order on consent that required certain site reclamation. This board had issued a prior permit that would authorize the completion of that site reclamation. However, that site reclamation was never completed. So the pool, which I believe is a vinyl pool, which is above grade, and the surrounding deck area, which is covered with AstroTurf, is getting up in years and will, within a short period of time, deteriorate and need to be addressed. One of the things, notwithstanding what I see as excessive structural coverage on this property, one of the things that I always look to do is see if we can be a little bit creative in terms of mitigation measures in order to offset the impacts of that construction, not only of the extensive coverage, but the less wetland building setbacks. And there are several ways to do that. One is by maximizing the width and coverage of naturally vegetated buffers. That has not been done here. And the other way is to look at the entirety of the property, not only in the present day, but in terms of what the needs are going to be in future years, and see if there are other changes that can be made to management of the property, to the betterment of the wetlands. In the event that the applicant does not want to further expand the buffer as is proposed right now, in order to provide very extensive chicken run areas and garden areas on the property, what the applicant needs to look at is whether or not there are ways to enhance the contiguity of the proposed buffer. And one of the options that the landowner could consider at this time is to remove the existing elevated pool and deck. Again, it's not a gunite pool, it's not a very expensive pool, and look to see if that pool can be relocated further landward on the property. So by doing that, what it would enable the applicant to do is to tie the proposed buffers together so that you have one contiguous parallel buffer landward of the wetlands. So I would offer that if the applicant is willing to demolish the existing pool and deck and relocate that pool and deck further landward adjacent to the house, I could support the building plans for this site and support establishment of a lesser buffer than that which is required on this property, because the removal and relocation of that pool and deck area would offer a substantial wetland impact mitigation. If the applicant has no interest in doing that, what they again need to look at is maximizing the buffer in a manner more consistent with the earlier sketch that I provided for the initial plan that was put forward for this site. So, so there, in sum, there are several issues that need to be addressed here. The amount of, based on my evaluation of the amount of fill that's needed for septic elevation and routing of the septic line to the house, the amount of fill could still be reduced by about 2/3. The other fill that's proposed for the purposes of elevating the house, for the purposes of elevating the drainage structures, is not necessary. So I would still like to see a significant reduction in the fill amounts. And again, in the event that the applicant has no interest in demolishing and removing that existing pool and deck and relocating that further landward, thereby allowing for connection of the proposed buffer, the buffer needs to be yet significantly expanded on this site in order to make this project more compatible with the wetland permit issuance standards. Thank you.
Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning. I'm a little confused. It seems like we're moving backwards, because when we left here last time, it was my understanding that Mr. Shea was in full support of the original project with the detached barn at 10 feet from the property line. We have kept the house the same, attaching a smaller version of a garage to the house and actually reoriented it so that everything is 75 feet away. It was less, I think it was about 58 feet on the, I think it's west side, the right side of the drawing. I think it's the east, yes, in the last iteration. So we've actually increased the setback from the town-owned wetlands on Fanning Road than our original proposal. Reduced the scope of the work, significantly reduced the fill by more than 50%. The amount of fill we're requesting right now is pretty customary for a project where a house is being demolished and a new house is going in. I don't really see it as excessive. The pool was never part of the project. It was never a part of the project. And that was stated at the last meeting. That is not in the cards at this time, and may be something in the future, but at this time, it's not part of this project. So part of the buffer design right now is to allow for the potential removal of that pool in the future, relocation of that pool in the future. Marty's mentioned something about the 6-foot area around the back of the pool. That was actually allowed in his original sketch. So we maintained that in our proposal. I don't know. We've tried to pull things away from the wetlands and away from the neighbor as much as we can to appease not only this board, but also the health department and the New York State DEC, who have asked us for a number of items that I'm not able to get addressed until I know exactly where I'm going with this project, with this board. But I am keeping all of that in mind as I'm moving forward with this project design. I guess I would be curious to hear any comments the board might have on the buffer design. When we were here last time, we had talked about trying to gain as much sun for the garden, which is why it's located where it is on the property.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. Just to provide clarity for the record, the first time around I indicated that I would support the plans if a much greater portion of the property was dedicated for the purposes of establishing a covenanted buffer, and that has not been done. So that's one of the primary reasons that I have concerns about this project. Again, the applicant is seeking significant relief from both the wetland construction and buffer setbacks and they certainly can do better than what's shown on this plan. The only reason that I mentioned the pool is, unless I misheard the applicant indicated that one of the reasons they wanted this open area around the pool was to reserve enough area for a potential demolition and replacement of that pool in the future. I'm just trying to be creative here. I'm trying to find a way to support the current project plans, yes.
Yeah, demolishing the pool now and extending the buffer would be ideal, but I do believe that Daphne had said previously that that was something they wanted to consider in the future, but economically it was not feasible with everything else that was happening, so she could not entertain that. And I was aware of that, and I don't know if everybody else caught that. So bringing it up now, it is ideal, but I don't know if that's fair, you know, when we've given her other instructions and guidelines to look at.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to be creative here and looking at all the possible options here. If they don't want to touch the pool and deck at this time, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. The other quick point I wanted to make is if the fill deposition plan is being driven by the DEC, what the applicant needs to do is share their communications with the DEC with my office, so we can contact the DEC as well to better understand why in a site that has great natural infiltration, they're looking for what appears to be excessive drainage, and also so that I can better understand why they are looking for significant elevation of that drainage. Where there is an opportunity, my office looks to reach out to the DEC to coordinate a project review. But I don't quite understand at this point in time why the DEC is apparently asking for such a large quantity of fill on this site. It's not consistent with the parameters that typically my office works with. We look to reserve fill to the raising of the septic system and septic lines as much as is practicable. And while we may allow for minimal backfilling of foundation, we don't authorize fill for the purposes of elevating homes in flood zones because of the concerns about what those activities might do in terms of the natural flooding and drainage patterns. The way when you build a home in a flood zone, whether it's on pilings or whether it's on a foundation with hydrostatic flood vents, the home is designed so when that flood surge comes in, those vents open up, the water goes under the home, and then it recedes under the home back to the marshlands and bay. It appears, based upon the drawings we have and the description of the application, that the plans don't allow for that natural flooding and recession of flood waters. So, that's a great concern here. Thank you.
Good evening, Michael Hausman, homeowner. I just wanted to address the buffer. At the last meeting, we had proposed a smaller buffer, and we were asked to let you know what percentage that was of what Marty originally had asked for. And we discussed the need for a garden and space for our chickens. And we had talked about access to the pool. So we came back and we did increase the native buffer considerably from what we had proposed in the last meeting. And so Marty was asking for a little bit over 10,800 square feet, and we came back with 8,000 square feet. So we're off by 2,800 square feet, which I think in a property of almost 2 acres is not a lot of land. And we're going to use that land for gardening and for a place for our chickens to graze. We free range them, and to have access to our structure so that we can actually have a few feet around the pool and a few feet around the house. So I just wanted to address that. I think I know that there are, guidelines and numbers, but that seems pretty reasonable for someone who, has almost 2 acres to have a little bit of space that they can use around their house. And we're not planning on building anything there. We just want to have space for our garden and for our chickens. And as far as the fill goes, I understand, and I'm not an engineer, but what I've been told is that, if the fill was all for the septic would be higher than the house. We can't have the septic higher than the house. The house has to come up a little bit. The house, our first floor right now in the house is a little over 7 feet. And that didn't flood during Sandy, but apparently it came very close. And the ground around it is around 5.5 feet. So we're talking about coming up a couple feet maybe, and only in the area around the house. And the water the whole center of the house is open on the first floor. The precast concrete walls with the hydrostatic openings are on either side, so the water will flow right through. It's not going to displace the water. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
One question.
Yeah.
Marty did suggest moving the pool. I know you talked about not wanting to do that. But I would urge you to think about where maybe the next round of whatever your plans are in the future, if you want to do something, where that might go. Because if you want to redevelop that spot where the pool is and put in a gunite pool, for example, it's not likely we would approve that.
Thank you. I can tell you that we have no plans on moving the pool. The only thing that we are thinking is that we might have to access it. And the pool is actually in very good shape. I don't see having to do any repairs in the next, half a dozen years. I can't imagine doing anything. But if we have to at some point, or if there's a big flood, we get water there during a nor'easter. So that pool could easily be damaged by, I shouldn't say easily, but my point is we need to have access to it. We're not planning on moving it anywhere. We don't know where, there's no place for us to move it to, and that was never part of the conversation, and I think maybe we misspoke and said that maybe we would think about it, but it's really just to access it for, there's in the back of the pool, there's the, filters and the pumps and things, and they have to get back there, and they have a little cart they go back there with, so it's really just access. We can't even conceive of moving that pool at this point. We could never afford it, and it's not part of the plan.
Okay. My point simply is, because we've seen a lot of these applications, and we've seen a lot of times somebody comes back and wants to do something, and it's too late because we've preempted the spot where it might go.
I understand. No, we are very happy with this plan. We were I don't want to say disappointed, but we were a bit dejected after the last meeting because we thought we had a great plan. But we think this is a really great plan. We're happy with this. And I don't think we see ourselves doing anything, differently in the future.
How many chickens do you have?
We have 10 chickens and 3 turkeys at this point. But we'd like to get a few more chickens. We're actually getting a few more chickens from the Cutchogue Library. They're doing a program with the kids there where they they have hatchlings for the kids to see, and then we're gonna adopt the chickens after they're hatched. The reason why we will do a fenced-in area there, because we have a lot of predators. We have raccoons, hawks, and fox. So we need to have a bit of protected area there, which is why putting it behind the house, so we can kind of use the house as like one side of the area, and the pool is one side of the area. So, you know, when you look at these square footages, originally we had kind of very specific designated areas, but I said, listen, you know, the garden is going to be the garden, and the chicken run is going to be the chicken run, and they'll be next to each other, and that just seemed to make the most sense to kind of lay it out like that.
2,000 feet for 10 chickens?
Well, if that 2,000 feet goes all the way to the walk, you know, that's every square foot, all the way to the pool, all the way, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't even do that calculation, but I think that's all of that area. So, yeah, maybe the garden will be a little bit bigger. I don't know, I mean, maybe, I mean, it's just, you know, right now, they walk over the entire property. You know, they have access to the entire property right now, and we don't feel comfortable doing that, so we want to have a smaller area. I mean, the way the border is laid out, it looks, to me, it looks good. I mean, it looks like you know, it's a nice line. I mean, we can have plantings there, and then we can use the other space. I mean, it seems pretty big.
Are you looking to have the garden to be 1,600 square feet?
That's the total area there. I mean, you know, we'd like to have a big garden. I mean, we have probably about 1,000 square feet now that we're tearing up. And if we're doing you know, we're doing pumpkins and things like that, we need a lot of space for that.
Well, it seems 4 areas in my, looking at this application right now, need to be addressed. The least amount is that pathway to the pool. The second is the size of the chicken coop and the chicken, and the what you're calling the chicken run. That's the second. The other one is the size of the garden and where you're going to have it. And the fourth one is, I think that Daphne has to get together with the engineer, DEC, Health Department, and get a little bit more concise and tightened up about this fill aspect, because it seems to be an issue. So if we could get some information about that, we might be able to maybe give a little bit on the buffer. I'm not saying we will, I'm just saying maybe we can do that, and we can make a clearer decision on the fill.
Well, I mean, it's very hard for me to speak to what the engineering.
Yeah, well, I'm not asking you to
Yeah.
respond to that right now. What I'm presenting is that this is something I think you have to take back. Everybody has to sit down, get it together, and then represent it to us so that we can make it until, right now, it's
Well,
like...
excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
So we did this, and we came back with a plan that has less than 50% of the fill. And we did redesign the drainage, and we talked to the town engineer. And I don't think we can insert the DEC into this conversation until we have an idea what you will let us do. Because.
Well, I thought that, Daphne, correct me if I'm mistaken, but you mentioned there's a certain requirement by the Health Department or the DEC with regard to the amount of fill?
Well, we're trying to satisfy the 2-foot separation to groundwater that's required by both of those agencies for both the sanitary and the drainage. And those are per their codes.
Okay, so, see, I'm getting something from Marty, I'm getting something from you. It's not easy to come to a decision here because the information is a little scattered. What I'm just asking for is to have your engineer be precise about what he thinks you need, what the DEC, the health department will allow, and what Marty thinks and what we
Well-
think are best.
This plan is what our engineer believes is what we need to satisfy those agencies, which is what he's stating in this letter. And he, he's the guy with the stamp. I'm not an engineer. He's the guy who went to school for this and.
My suggestion
all
is
of
that,
that.
he's gotta be here. Okay,
Yes.
so maybe next time, you could give him a ride or whatever.
Well, word hostage of,
Go ahead, spit it out.
he didn't, we tried to get him here, he's not here. He had something else he had to do. So we're hostage to this engineer, but he has a written statement of what he believes has to
Well,
happen.
look, Harry raised quite a few issues about the fill. Marty raised quite a few issues about the fill. We need some accurate response from your professional. And I'm not saying Daphne's not professional, I'm just saying she's already admitted she's not an engineer, so we need something like that before we can make an intelligent decision.
Well, but the letter is stating his position. He's not gonna, he says it in the letter that we have to have the house at a certain elevation in order for the septic to work. Now, if the house isn't, we need the fill to get the house to that elevation, otherwise the septic won't work.
I mean,
What
you
happens
can,
if you make the house higher?
More fill. But we don't wanna make the house higher. We're trying to keep it as low as possible.
you can see, what they're doing here is they have quite a fair amount of length of pipe that they need an invert elevation from the house to the septic tank to get the proper gravity feed to the tank. So that's what a lot of this fill is necessary for. So this is also a driveway, so you can't just necessarily have a mound of fill to cover that pipe for that invert elevation. You also then have to probably carry it across here. Again, I'm not an engineer, but this is what my hypothesis is that you would have to carry that fill across this driveway area to not only accommodate the driveway area, but also for that proper invert elevation required for that pipe to the septic. So although the leaching structures themselves do not necessarily require a large amount of the fill because they can be much higher in elevation because they're only 6 inches deep, the tank and the invert pipe elevations require more fill. That's what I would.
Yeah, but you're using the fill to raise the house, is that correct?
The fill is necessary to raise the house to get that invert for the gravity feed,
Well, if you made the foundation higher, wouldn't that accomplish the same thing?
but you would still need the fill to cover the pipe because the pipe can't just be exposed. It has to be covered by a certain amount of dirt so it doesn't freeze. It has to be underground, so.
The other thing I'd say is this is a vast improvement to what's there right now. There's a house there, the water that does not have any hydrostatic anything, and there's a hole in the ground for the septic. This septic system is like a wastewater treatment plant. It's very elaborate, and we're vastly improving the property. And, cubic yards of fill?
It's
It's five something, but
527.
we're taking some away. So I think the net, I don't remember exactly the numbers, so.
The engineer said 500 and change is where
the
you're
net?
at, is where you are right now, yes.
527 overall.
Now, with an elevated house and underground septic, are you saying the vertical component of that system needs to be covered with dirt?
Yeah. Vertical, yeah, yes?
Well, you're going up with a house, and there's a pipe's gotta come down to the ground.
There's cross-section in the plans on page C2. So it's showing the grade coming out of the house at elevation 7. And then it goes down to elevation 5.5 over the leaching structures. So the septic tank itself is at elevation 6. So you need to have, it's a 7-foot high structure, these tanks. So it's going to be, he says in his letter here, hold on. Let me read the paragraph. The leaching field for the on-site wastewater treatment system is required to be 2 feet above the highest expected groundwater. The highest expected groundwater elevation determined in test hole conducted by Sean Barron, MS, on October 12, 2021, was at elevation 1.6. The leaching field requires an elevation of 5.5 feet minimum. The OWTS specified is the Hydroaction AN500C. At such low elevation, the unit provides the required anti-buoyancy specifications. This unit has been set at elevation 6 to maintain the appropriate 1/4 inch to 1 foot slope of the inlet pipe and appropriate pipe cover amount. To meet these minimum conditions, 404.75 cubic yards of clean fill is required.
So there's 2 areas, one is on each side of in the basement area. One is storage, and one is, what was the other one?
Workshop.
Workshop. Will they be on a poured concrete floor?
Yes. The center section is gravel between where the cars, between the two.
And there'll be walls to,
Yeah, there are square, rectangular walls. Each, the workshop and the storage area are rectangular with walls.
okay. So, will that area be heated?
No.
No.
It's not conditioned at all, it's just,
It's just like an unfinished basement, essentially.
What's the height from the concrete to the bottom of the house?
8 feet.
The first floor elevation of the residence is at 16 and a half. So, yeah, I think the ceiling height would be at about probably 7.5 feet, because you've got probably about 1.5 feet of freeboard, probably 2 feet.
Yeah,
Between the
I think
joists.
they get close to 8 feet, but not quite.
I'm trying to understand this testimony that you've both given, that when the house is raised, it necessitates an increase in fill. I don't compute that. Marty says you don't need that. I'm trying to figure out why you say you do. Can you clarify that?
This is an AE flood zone, so this is no different than a normal house that would be constructed in an AE flood zone, except this basement that we're proposing would be mostly exposed above ground. It's an AE8 flood zone, so the first floor elevation has to be at a minimum of elevation 10. We're proposing it at elevation 16.5, and still meeting the height requirements of the house. And we're meeting pyramid, we're meeting all of those restrictions that we're allowed to with FEMA. What am I saying? To get that invert elevation required for the sanitary system, as the engineer is stating here, for the pipe, that minimum elevation needs to be at least 6 to work. Michael is choosing to have the house at 7 for those under the house areas, to allow for less chance of flooding. So he can have a workshop and maybe not have tools get flooded, potentially, have less of a chance.
So above that is a two-story house. So now
Yes.
you've got an 8-foot workshop, and then above that, you've got a two-story house. And the
Essentially.
reason that you need all this fill is so that you can have that workshop underneath the...
We only need 100, according to Paul's letter, because of that additional foot of elevation, we need 122.5 cubic yards of additional fill for that additional elevation. Otherwise, the rest of the fill of 404.75 cubic yards is required to elevate the house to the minimum elevation necessary for the sanitary system to be set where it's supposed to be and to work properly.
I think I might, I think the point is that where the drain pipe, sanitation pipe exits the house, it has to be underground.
Come to the mic.
I'm sorry, it has to be underground, right? Where it exits the house, and that spot has to be at least 6 feet.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't work. So we have to get at least that elevation, no matter what's built on top of it. It doesn't matter, we can't have the pipe come out at 6 foot, at shoulder height and go across the driveway. It has to be, underground. So the land has to be that high at that spot. And we have no choice. We got rid of a lot of fill, and I'm very happy about getting rid of a lot of fill. I don't want to pay to bring it in, and I understand the issues with flooding. I mean, the majority of the flooding happens behind our house. The water doesn't come up the front, it's all from behind. So, I guess if we have a Sandy, we'll see what happens, but I don't think we'll be displacing much water.
You know how high Sandy came to your house?
I was told that it got to 7, which is where our first floor is 7.5. I was told it got to about that, but it didn't go over that.
Okay.
7.5.
All right.
Is this mine? Okay.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. One of the ways that the gravity flow issues are addressed with residential septic systems is to install a residential sanitary pump station. What that allows for is for the house to be at a lower elevation than the height of the septic system. Essentially, the septic effluent is pumped from the lower elevation up to the height of the septic system. Septic system itself still has to be raised on fill. And yes, any exposed septic lines have to be buried in fill. But it avoids the need to elevate the house further in order to allow for
How
that,
deep into the ground would that have to
gravity
be?
flow. What?
How deep in the ground would that pump have to be, Marty?
Well, I would have to, in order to answer that question, it's a component of the sanitary.
I understand
system.
that, but if
It's
you're 2 feet
installed-
down into water, and then you're going to put a mechanical
No,
pump?
no, it's installed as a unit where the septic effluent is piped out of the house. The pump station forces it up to a higher elevation so that it will function properly. And so that.
That's
the
not,
septic
I understand that, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, how low would you have to have that pump for the effluent to pass from the house? You're looking to lower the house, you're going to need
No,
to,
I'm not looking to lower the house. In fact, the house can be structurally elevated without fill and to allow for a gravity flow system to work. I'm just saying, if they don't want to structurally elevate the house higher, that you can achieve the needed septic functioning by installing a residential pump station, which pumps the septic from the house at a lower elevation up to the height of the septic system. I would have to sit down and look at the plans and look at the planned elevation of the house to tell you exactly where that pump station would be installed, and which we're happy to do that and happy to bring that information to the next meeting. But what pump stations, residential pump stations are often installed in flood zones because the septic systems won't work properly if they're in groundwater. So they need to be elevated, but oftentimes the house is lower than that system. So that sanitary engineer needs to speak to why a septic pump station can't be installed in order to overcome the gravity issues. That being said, if they don't want to go with the septic pump station, again, they can achieve the needed elevation for the gravity flow down to the septic system by structurally elevating the house rather than bringing in fill for that purpose. Thank you.
We spent a lot of time on fill. I think I finally understand it. And I'm going to just summarize what I think is going on here. You can confirm that or tell me I'm wrong. And the board can voice support or whatever on that too. So the house is being proposed at a certain elevation, and the fill is being brought in because that's where the slab is going to be poured at that level, and that's going to allow for the septic system to function with the pipe going underground. It's also going to allow for a workspace and storage area, which will be not flooded almost all the time, except for some very unreasonable circumstance, like a Sandy, which is the most water I've ever seen in a storm surge in my life, which has no bearing on the future, but it just gives things in perspective. And the fill for that purpose has been calculated by the engineer and has been presented in his letter, and that's where we are right now. So the Coltech discussion is somewhat moot because the Coltech is only one component, but there are other components driving that elevation anyway, so the Coltech system can work at the level of fill that he's proposing. And whether it's calculated with the gravel or not the gravel, as I suggested earlier, is really moot. It doesn't matter. So to reduce the fill under the house could cause some additional issues, and the fill under the house could displace some water in the most extreme storm circumstances. It's hard to really plan on those extreme circumstances when I think of if I was having a workshop and going to work there for 50 years and there's one day that I can't go down there because it's flooded. All right, so that's the problem. But I get over that. I have a hard time myself planning for or restricting your fill to allow for those days that you can't work there to be increased, when there's very little benefit going to be gotten. So I'm okay with the fill that you've suggested. I think it's reasonable to make the house suitable to live there and do the things you want to do there. So I'm okay with that. Is the board in sync with what I'm saying, or do you have issues?
No, I'm okay with it. I'm very comfortable with this revised plan that they've come back with.
I would like to then put that to rest and have a discussion about the other issues that's been presented. And the primary other issues is the amount of buffer. We've got a new category of buffer called Marty buffer. And then we have the grade area that is the native buffer, which is what the applicant has offered. My personal feeling is that native buffer is insufficient. I recognize it's a big property, but I also recognize there's not much upland area of that property. I'm disappointed that there's no plan to move that pool, because what I see in the next 10 years or some number of years is that you're going to want to do something with that pool. And what I am concerned about is that we'll do something with a buffer that's going to preclude, and a house and garage that's going to preclude you moving that pool in a place that is more environmentally accepting of it. And that's why, if you did choose to move that, do a bigger project with the pool now, we could put that where it wants to be and take care of that. But there are impacts when you build a house this big, this close to the water, with all this environmental stuff going on. So the buffer is the primary thing that we use to mitigate the impacts. I do think there has to be some expansion of that buffer. Exactly what? I think we need to talk about that. It's impossible to get to the 75 feet that the law recommends. And when that happens, we have chapter 325-9D, which says you go through these various tests to see if we're going to meet these tests for making this project suitable for issuance of a permit, or meet the conditions for issuance of a permit. And there is some judgment involved. Your buffer is approximately 45 feet, but then there's that pool sticking right out there where it would be buffer if it wasn't there. And the Marty buffer is something additional. I don't know what that, do you remember what that averages out to be, Marty?
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. What I was seeking to do is to maximize the buffer, because that's what Chapter 325 directs you to do. I was seeking to establish enough buffering to come as close to the average overall required buffer width of 75 feet as much as is practicable on this property. That's what the wetland permit issuance standards direct you to do. If there is an inability to provide a linear parallel buffer of 75 feet, you are to look at opportunities for maximizing it in some areas and lessening it in other areas to come as close to an average all buffer width of 75 feet as much as is possible. There's a very extensive garden and chicken run area that is being proposed between the house and the naturally vegetated buffer, and certainly the landowner can expand upon that buffer.
Hi, I'm Michael Hausman, landowner. Okay, so I guess we like, to, really, thank you, I'd like to sort this out. It seems to me that we could certainly reduce the 6 foot to maybe 4 foot. So we pick up, more there and more here. We can give some more in the front here. So maybe we'll sort of, make that more of a curve, like a crescent. And we can also maybe round this out a little bit and bring this, pick up some more here and make this area a little smaller. I'm not exactly sure what the best way forward is to lay this out. I mean, I could draw it right here, or could we agree to, maybe we add another 1,000 square feet? I don't know how much it matters to you where those 1,000 square feet end up.
Well, that's just what I was thinking. What is the most sensitive? Where are we gonna help the most? Which side of the property?
Help what?
Well,
Wetlands.
protecting the wetlands, and it looks like
Well, about,
the northwest side is,
yeah,
Yes, I would agree.
well, this back here is not really lots of roads anyway, so, the wetlands are here and here, right? So we can certainly, bring more in the front. We were just looking, the front area, we're not really planning on using for anything other than just having access to come back here. So we could certainly
you can
give.
also get access down the driveway and around the other side.
Right. Well, how about if we go another 10 feet? I'm not sure how long. I think we want to have something in front of the house, in front of the porch. But we could certainly give a significant amount in the front. I think that would be a lot better for us. And in the back, we can keep for the garden and whatnot. And the front, I think, is the more sensitive area because the bay is here.
Yep.
And this is all pretty gnarly back here. I mean, you can see it's all this kind of,
This structure in front of the house, is that a porch or a deck, or what is that?
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. The green slats?
Yes.
That's a deck. That's a raised deck.
And the size of that deck, how far does it come out from the house? You're just getting, I just see square footage here, I don't see linear feet.
I don't have that number.
I'm gonna say it's probably 25 feet.
No.
No?
16,
How much?
16.
15?
16.
Look at this, this is 15 feet here, from there to there. So it's-
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
think
but I'm looking
we
30
could pick
feet
up
here.
quite a bit in the front, and then some around the side of the pool here. And on this side of the pool as well.
Well, that's an area that you could work on, I think.
I mean, we could certainly, is there a number
Get 10 feet right over there.
that would
Yeah.
And what is that?
please everyone?
So that's 25 feet then.
17, no.
Well, it becomes over 10 feet.
Well, Marty's already drawn a buffer there of 6,128 square feet. Now, does that include everything or just that?
That's-
A.
Another
So
number there.
subtract 1703 from it, and you'll get what the difference is. There's the calculator.
Where'd you get the 17?
Right
It's
here.
right here.
Don't you,
See the
don't mess,
native
don't
buffer
mess
A?
with.
See, and then you have,
Yeah,
and then
so
you have
you,
Marty's buffer, 6128.
Yes.
I think you gotta add
Yeah, you have to
Buffer
add the
two
three.
and three.
Yeah,
Two
there's
and
two
three.
A's. Number 2 and 3.
which is about 550, 100,
Right.
so it's about 1,000. That
Yeah.
additional buffer in that area is about
Is about
1,000 square
1,000.
feet.
this, cut that, come across here, that, and you see, be able to round that off a little, not as much on that side.
Now, tell me about that 6 feet around the pool. What is that use? What's the purpose of that?
Well, we do have to access that area. I mean, we can make that.
Because it's raised, you need that from the ground to get it, to do work on it, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's raised and it's open, but we could make it smaller, we can make it 4 feet. Why don't we make it 4
Okay, so they're
feet?
taking 2
Okay.
feet off of that.
That'll pick up quite a bit
Yep.
all the way around.
And then that'll give you this space over here on the right for your garden and
Yeah,
space for the chickens.
exactly.
Any way you could round that edge of the deck off, the 152 square feet over there?
Uh,
I don't say the whole thing, but a little bit of it, make it a rounder.
I don't think our architects would let us.
I don't know what that would accomplish.
I'd leave it alone. You just gotta.
Yeah, it's not gonna.
And that's also,
it's not
that's
gonna
above,
accomplish
that's,
anything.
that's raised, the, underneath it is just.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
That's not impacting the ground.
A mathematician convinced me to leave that alone.
Let's get going.
I don't know how
But I mean, I think we could pick up 1,000 square feet pretty,
Yeah.
pretty
Okay, so,
easily.
That's fine. That's
so
good.
what I'm hearing is reduce the space around the pool from 6 feet down to 4 feet,
Correct.
and add Marty's buffer to your buffer on the left side, that's 6,128 square feet. I think that includes everything. But the hatched line is already on the drawing.
Hey, Daphne, could you help me with that?
It's the gray.
Is that the dotted, the slash line, this slash line?
This one is Marty's buffer.
Right.
There, I would say maybe to round that out a little bit.
Yeah, you know, we
What's
could,
that?
what I would like to do with that, Marty's buffer in the front, is if we could round it out, where it says pool access, if we made a curve there instead of a hard 90-degree, and
Yeah.
then
Maybe
maybe pull it away
back a
from
little.
the house a little bit, we could probably give you more space, but pull it away from the house a little bit.
Pulling what away from the house?
The Marty's buffer, see, right, the dotted line has a 90-degree angle, right where it says pool access.
I see what you're
But
saying,
we can
yeah.
curve that off, give you a larger buffer there, and then just scoot it back from the house a little bit. And also make this angle where it hits the walkway to the pool, make that a little cleaner, so it's more of a curve. I think we could actually give you significantly more there.
We have
But-
to get this to the concrete in, I don't know how we're gonna do that, probably a sketch or eventually on a survey.
I'll draw it right on this,
Uh,
for tonight,
We got the concept.
okay?
We can have the architect.
Yeah, that'd be very fast, yeah, very fast.
I like, can they be considered
One
as
second,
mitigation, moving the house?
Would you be agreeable to give up the garden area and do whatever gardening that you want to do in planters? You've got plenty of deck
Why not?
space, you've got plenty of southern exposure.
We really have quite a garden, I mean, it's really,
Moving a structure.
it's a lot.
They can't,
We grow a lot of our
they
own
can't move
food.
this structure.
Well, planters work as well.
They moved the original
Yeah,
structure.
I mean,
Here's the original structure.
They-
See
they-
it?
they tore it
I
down.
mean, then we would have
Right,
our
but you see
entire
how
deck
far
would be.
into
Yeah.
the,
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Planters.
I mean, it's an interesting
I mean,
suggestion.
now this
but
is gonna be buffer
I
where
don't
the
think it'll
existing
work.
house was gonna
Thank
be.
you.
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, instead of cutting here and cutting there, it would be so much easier if you would give up that garden area and be able to put it somewhere else, or do planters, or something. That would make me happy.
And I
Yeah.
understand.
I think they were looking at this part because this here, the wetlands are much more sensitive, and you have the bay over here. So if they
Right.
were picking one place where they wanted to increase the buffer, it was over here rather than here.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lot here, was it? How
Well, they were
many
getting
square feet?
1,000 square feet.
Oh, we're out of here?
Here,
Yeah.
and then taking and
All right,
reducing.
4 feet? Okay.
Yeah, reducing that.
All right.
You know, because
I
here
wasn't
you have
sure
pretty
there was that much.
sizable, and they're away from the water.
No, I
Yeah.
understand that, yeah.
Okay.
But I wasn't, I didn't think we get 1,000 feet out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town, here's what I recommend, that we adjourn the hearing for 2 weeks, give the applicant an opportunity to submit a drawing, because it's very difficult to envision what the applicant has in mind. And we'll look to address that at the next hearing. I think there may be members of the public here that want to speak as well, so I just want to make sure that you don't move to adjourn the hearing prior to giving the public an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Michael Hausman again. 2 quick things. We talked quite a bit about the sun being important for the garden, so that's where it is there. And as far as the buffer goes, I think we're very, very close to coming to agreement. I don't want to go away without communication for 2 weeks, without having a very clear idea what we're going to come back to you with. So I would love to just sketch something that we all think is what we're talking about, and then we can go to the architects and get you exact drawings and exact square footage. But I don't want to have any kind of misunderstanding, because I feel like we're so close with the
Okay,
buffer.
we're talking about in the broad sweep, using the area identified on the left side as Marty buffer. You spoke about a couple of modifications. So here's what I'm, plus we're gonna move the pool buffer or area down to 4. That's easy, that's all figured out. But for the Marty buffer, rather than draw something right here, take that back to your architect and draw something up for us. Whatever you can, however you can make that size or bigger would be sweet. If you want to make some adjustments, some curving, some things, that's fine. But come back to us with a square footage and a clear identifiable area that will be used as buffer so that it can be used for the covenant.
Okay, so we're going to address those 2 areas?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Marty? Excuse me, Adam. I think you might have given me
No, you said seconds. Someone indicated that they were on. You can take whatever you want.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael G. Walsh at 60 Montauk Highway, Watermill, New York, for the adjoining neighbor,
Michael, could you
Candace.
just adjust that microphone a little bit, please? Thank you.
Michael G. Walsh, 860 Montauk Highway, Watermill, New York, for the adjoining neighbor, Candace Huffine. We were here at the last hearing, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and we made a couple of initial points, the most important of which, I think, we called out the fact that this applicant, had never filed with your board as required by the application form and by the code, copies of any covenants and restrictions that burden this property. And the reason that we asked for that is because right on the form, I put it in correspondence, by the way, which has been uploaded to your site, and also I delivered by email today to Ms. Goree a copy of this with the exhibits. One of the questions on the form: are there any right-of-ways, easements, or other recorded covenants which encumber the property? If yes, the nature of these restrictions, and please indicate the nature of the restrictions and supply copies of the legal instruments. Said documents can be obtained from the Suffolk County Clerk's Office. Answer: none known to date. That derives from Section 325(7)(d)(3) of the code. The reason we always do that when we apply to you, and we attach the covenants and restrictions that burden the property in the first instance, is so that we don't waste your time or the time of any of your departments, building inspector, planning board, zoning board, conservation board,
Attorney?
attorney's office, with items that shouldn't be even before your board, okay? In this particular case, we call that out, we looked at the file, there still to this date has been no title certification filed. My client went ahead and paid $1,400 to have one done by Fidelity National Title. It's now part of your record. And voila, indeed, there are at least 3 very important covenants and restrictions that burden the property. Number 1, let's eliminate this chicken question, okay? The first one that we uncovered is an express prohibition against keeping, and let me read it to you. No poultry house or pen shall be allowed on said lot, and no pigeons or animals other than domestic pets shall be kept or maintained on said lot. That's part of the covenants and restrictions that burden this property. It's in a certified title certification, certified to the town of Southampton, not to my client. We made sure that Fidelity did that. There's a covenant restriction that prohibits the keeping of poultry, either in a pen, a shed, a barn. So we'd like to eliminate that issue right off the bat. Had the applicant disclose that to you, we wouldn't have this big discussion, taking up your time looking at chicken runs and chicken pens and all the rest of it. Fact of the matter is, poultry is
What's the
prohibited.
date on that covenant, Michael?
That covenant is May 17, 1952. It was filed with the map, with the subdivision map. By the way, covenants don't die because of age. They have to be modified. Lot owners have to sign off in order to strip a covenant off a piece of land. You have to get the consent of all the owners. I've also cited a case that stands for that proposition to answer that question. If we could just show on the screen there, Ms. Gore, if you'd be so kind, Exhibit 1 that I filed today to my letter. I just want to go through some photos and some pictures. I think it'd be a lot easier. The first exhibit is a photocopy of the tax map, which we saw when we first looked at the application. And what struck us at the outset is the lot doesn't match up with the tax map. When I say the lot, I mean the lot that's been depicted on the survey and the lot that's depicted on the site plan. If you look what's depicted on this site plan here, what you'll notice right away, that the entire lot's not even depicted. You can't tell from this site plan what parcel we're dealing with, okay? Point number 1. Look at the tax map. The green parcel is my client's property, and she resides at 24 Pearson Road, Candace Huffine. The adjoining parcels, you'll see there are 2 of them, is a 15,000 square foot subdivision lot and an adjoining out parcel with a dotted line running through the 2 parcels. And our first question was, how do you get to what's depicted on this map and depicted on the surveys from that? We all know that tax maps don't tell us the state of a title, but what we were able to do was we were able to go to Fidelity and we were able to figure out a number of very critical issues. If we can go to number 2, please. That's the title certification. It's certified to the town of Southampton. If we could go to number 3, please. That's the covenant restriction that we're talking about. It contains the language prohibiting the poultry. It also contains a couple of right-of-ways that I'll get into in a moment. If you can go to the next exhibit, please. This is a critical exhibit. Why is it important? It's the subdivision map on which the applicant's property is contained. There's a number of arrows, and you'll notice that there's one arrow with a box up in the left-hand corner pointing to lot number. If you could just can you blow that up a little bit, Ms. Gordy, is that possible?
24?
24, thank you very much, Mr. Hine. Number 24, that's my client's property, and adjoining it is lot number 25, which is the subject parcel, part of the subject parcel. Somehow, lot number 24 was merged with that parcel with the name Harry Bagshaw on it, okay? How did that happen? Well, it apparently happened at or about the time that this swimming pool was built. Apparently it was built over the line or on the Bagshaw parcel, which was owned by a different person than the owner of lot 25, and that's all in the title work. And as a consequence, the two parcels were merged, okay? And that's under our code, that's called a re-subdivision of land. When you merge two parcels, unless you fit one of the exemption provisions in the subdivision regulations, that's called a re-subdivision. In order to re-subdivide joint parcels that are on a subdivision map, you have to go to the planning board for approval. Never happened in this case. The second thing that happened, which gives you this configuration, which we don't have in a survey right now on the board, but the second thing that happened was lot 25 and the adjoining lot 29 decided to abandon Pearson Road, adjoining their property. That was what I call a private abandonment. Drafted up deeds, proved that the taxes had been paid for 20 years, obtained a title certificate that there were no encumbrances on the road, no structures. And they merged those, they abandoned Pearson Road and split the roadbed of Pearson Road, which was 50 feet wide, between lot 25 and lot 29, increasing the size of this lot in order to get adequate setback distance in the front yard. Pearson Road, I'm just going to indicate on the map here, should be running almost touching the corner of this house, but for that abandonment. That was the second re-subdivision of the property without planning board approval. So what's happened here is lot number 25 has been expanded in a subdivision that was originally designed for 15,000 square foot lots. There's approximately 29 lots on the map. And if you go to that neighborhood and you take a look around, what you'll find is the neighborhood is characterized by one story, very modest homes. In fact, there's a note on that map that talks about the type of septic system and the type of well that should be installed. And the specs, it was spec'd out for 2-bedroom bungalows. So the original design of the subdivision was for very small, modest homes on 15,000 square foot lots. So when we first looked at the configuration of the lot, we're questioning, how did we get to this point? How does this happen? And we were able to go back through the town archives, and we found a series of surveys. There was a survey by Mr. Ehlers, there was a survey by Mr. Buckheit, there were surveys by other surveyors. And if you could go to the next exhibit, please. Thank you, Ms. Gorey. Okay, this is a survey, it's part of the package. It's a survey by Jake Buckheit. That was the survey that was before your board, the DEC, and then ultimately the Zoning Board of Appeals. Because what happened here, this pool construction, by the way, that occurred, this swimming pool that everyone's been talking about, the large deck out there adjoining the wetlands, that was built without any permits whatsoever. No building permit, no zoning variance, nothing. The DEC violated the then owner. They entered into an order on consent. There was a $3,000 fine paid according to the documents that we put into the record. And there was an agreement that all of the wetlands, okay, including most of that Bagshaw lot that we saw on the map, which is pretty much all wetlands, would be conveyed to a conservation organization or the town of Southampton. That never happened. They never followed through with that. We don't have a copy of the zoning board of appeals variance file before you. I don't know if there's any conditions associated with the grant of the side yard variance to keep the pool in its present location. I think you have to have a look at that. So we've got the poultry prohibition. We've got this configuration of a lot that somehow was created, we don't know how, because it's never been explained in this application. It's never been disclosed to you by way of a title certificate, or any title work for that matter, as to how this was all created. We know that we have a re-subdivision by merging two lots without planning board approval. Doesn't fit within the exemption. You can merge lots if they're pre-existing non-conforming lots and they have been held in the same ownership. If they have not been held in single and separate ownership, you can merge them without coming to the planning board. Not the case here. One of the lots conformed as to area, the large Bagshaw lot. The small lot was not held in, it was not merged with the other lot. So it doesn't qualify for any exemptions. Had the planning board gotten a look at this, and had you sat as the wetlands, or if the planning board had sat as the wetlands review board, Marty Shea would have issued an advisory report, I suspect, and this would all have been resolved in some fashion by the imposition of restrictive covenants at that point, probably wetlands buffers, probably designation of a building envelope. And you wouldn't be where you are today with all this array of improvements, the largest structural footprint, probably by 2.5 to 3 times of any other lot in the neighborhood. And when I say lot in the neighborhood, if we could go back to that subdivision map for a moment, please. I think it was number 4. Yeah. Again, if you look at the lots in this neighborhood, particularly the interior lots, they're 15,000 square feet. Somehow, this lot's been bootstrapped apparently to 69 and change, depending on what survey you read. This really doesn't tell us how big the lot is. It doesn't even depict the entire lot, this site plan. The other thing that's very important is when that road was abandoned, the rights of all the lot owners, which was granted by the covenants and restrictions, to access the beach at this location, access the water to the north of the Bagshaw lot, as it's described in the CNRs, was essentially cut off. Because if you abandon the road and you deed one half of it to one private owner, the other half to another private owner, you've eliminated the roadbed. And they essentially cut off access to that beach, which was granted to all the lot owners in the subdivision CNRs. So you don't have any access because of the abandonment of the road.
What about Fanning Road? Michael, that goes right through that subdivision.
The easement was granted over both Fanning and Pearson Road,
Okay.
depending on where you live. Which, by the way, brings me to my next point, Mr. Hine. If you go to, bear with me, exhibit number 6, I believe. 6. Oh, that's the ZBA's decision, just if you go to 7, please, I'm sorry. Nope, no, that's the order on consent. Next one. I just can't see my list. Okay, the last exhibit it would be then. Yeah, if you can blow that up a little bit, please. What you'll see there, it's interesting because right above that subdivision lot is a little strip of land. See the light green? That's the lot in question, the light green. There's a strip of land 10 feet by 100 feet that travels along what's now the Houseman lot. And between that and the Bagshaw lot, which appeared to connect up Fanning Road with Pearson Road. And I think it would be logical to believe that the 10-foot path was to get the people on Fanning across to Pearson and then down to the beach. Because the developer, when he subdivided the property and marketed the lots, the scheme of development was such that you could get to the water, okay? So we question at the outset the configuration of the lot, how it was created, whether or not your board even has jurisdiction to grant the setback depicted on this site plan. They're showing a 30-foot front yard setback. Okay? We know Pearson Road is in the front yard. That setback is really 5 feet. If you peel back the layers and you look at what went on here, you've got a 5-foot setback from the corner of the house. And you know, we're willing to move forward before the ZBA, the planning board, whatever form that we can get to prove this out. But we're pretty confident that, that this lot, as it was created, okay, certainly is not configured as depicted to you in the various documents that have been filed. I've got all the law here. I've got the sections of the code for your council to review. And we'd like to also, caution the board that if there's prior ZBA determinations, there may be conditions imposed. I don't know yet. We're going to have to file foils on those files and figure out exactly what happened when this pool was built. Because when you have a situation where something that large is built without a permit on a separate lot, and you go to the DEC and you work out a violation, you come to the zoning board. Typically, there are some sort of conditions imposed on the grant of relief. Finally, just to talk about this fill issue, okay? What's really going on here, as we see it, is this house overall, best we can calculate it, it's going to be about 40 feet in height. How do we get to that? If you look at Sean Barron's test hole, he tells us that he's at 4.5 feet, the top of the ground to the surface of the ground. He goes down with his test hole auger 3 feet, he hits groundwater. He goes down another 1.5 feet, and he's at 0, mean sea level. So he tells us that the surface of the land is 4.5 feet. We're told by the applicant in their plans, depending on where you read, it's either 7 foot the foundational wall or 9.5. It's 2 different numbers, 2 different places. We know that the first floor elevation is 16.5. I assume that's either the bottom girder, or that's how they measure it for purposes of FEMA, 16.5, or it's the top of the floor. Pick either one. If you start at 16.5 above mean sea level, because you're always measuring from 0, okay, you're already 16.5 minus 4.5, because you're already got the 4.5 of dirt above 0. That gives you 12 feet. You're going to put on top of that some distance, which is the first floor height, and we calculate that to be approximately 11 to 11.5 feet. So now you're at 26, 27. On top of that, you're going to put another level, and it would appear there's no elevations here, so we really can't tell. We didn't see any elevations in this application, this portion. But you can count the steps because there's 2 sets of steps, a landing and steps are 8 1/4 inches, apparently, the risers. And if you calculate that out, it comes to about 11.5, 12 feet, the second story. So you're talking about a house that's about 40 feet in height. So you're essentially, I know you're not in the height business. I know that. I know that you're not in the zoning business. We get cautioned about that all the time. But you're talking about a project here that is 2.5 to 3 times larger structural footprint than any other residence in the neighborhood. And it's 40 feet tall. Every house in the neighborhood's 1 story. So how do you get to this? You get to this by manipulating the deed and the survey record. That's how you get to this. Because you can't build this on a 15,000 square foot lot, which was the original subdivision configuration of the lot on the recorded map. My client's lot is 15,000 square feet. She's got a house, swimming pool, all the amenities necessary. How do you get to this? So what we're asking you to do, look at the materials we submitted. We're going to submit more from what we heard about this fill calculation prior to the next hearing. I am not at all convinced, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, that the fill is driven by the septic system. Not at all convinced. We'll have to look at the submission of this engineer. We'll ask for a copy. And your offices have been very, very good about providing things. We really appreciate that. I thank you for your time this evening.
Yeah, Michael, I just have one question.
Sure.
I'm not sure where you want to go with this.
We want the application denied. period at the end of that sentence.
Okay.
We want the application denied. And we'd like the lot to be returned to its legal status, okay? It may be that at the end of the day, the original subdivision lot and the Bagshaw lot will be merged, but that usually comes with conditions. Comes with conditions.
How would you go
with
about doing
re-subdivision.
that? Would you have to take a, would you have to?
What would I do if I
Yeah.
were handling the application?
No, what would, how do you plan to accomplish this?
Accomplish what?
What you're asking?
The denial of the application?
Yeah.
By building my record before you and seeing your good offices, review all the materials that we submit, and make the appropriate determination, which I suggest to you is that this application should be denied. That's how we do it. Because what I've seen here is you've got things missing. They have not been, even though we asked for them, they were never filed between February and today. Title certificate's basic. Zoning application 101. If you have covenants and restrictions, you've got to attach them to your application. I mean, I don't know how you argue about the chickens when you've got a title report that calls out a prohibition on your lot against the keeping of poultry. That's a simple one. But that was never done in this application. These are pretty much basic fundamental things.
I don't think any of the boards uphold the covenants and restrictions from individual associations.
This is
No,
not,
they haven't, in my experience.
Well-
And there's been a move to ask them to at least submit a statement that they are in compliance, and that's not done in our town. It's done in other towns, but it's not done in Southampton.
Stating
appreciate
that they're
that.
in compliance with private covenants?
Yes,
yet,
and that's what you're asking us to uphold, and that's not part of our board, but it's not part of the planning board or the other boards either.
well, I would beg to differ on that point.
Okay.
Why? Because your application that you publish for your applicants calls out the requirement that you file those documents with your application. Your own code calls out and requires that you file those documents with your application. What else could the purpose be but to review the covenants and restrictions?
But they don't
for-
do it.
Well, that's, a lot of people don't follow the law, but
That's our boards.
we're here to tell you that it's my practice, the first time, when someone comes into my office, the first thing I do is I order a title report. That's simple, because there might be something there that's going to trip us up down the road after we spent all this time and money processing an application. Why do you want to find out you've got a no poultry requirement or covenant restriction on your lot when you're applying for your building permit?
Well,
So,
this
Mike,
isn't,
Kind of makes sense.
you have submitted all this to our...
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kelly's gonna be working overtime, huh?
yeah.
Lots of review.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have an extra one, Tom? Do you have an extra one?
No, more?
Yeah. It's some are black and white and some are color, but we've got.
Marty, did you get one?
You want this, Marty? You have a copy of this?
parking on Surfside Environmental Planning.
We'll share.
There should be
One more
7
for Zeb.
copies. I just submitted a copy of the most recent GIS map showing the parcel as it's configured in relation to the Twin Oaks Estate subdivision map,
What's this?
as well as a copy of the tax map showing the parcel as similarly, that Lot 25 of the Twin Oaks Estate subdivision is part of the Hausman property, with also a copy of that 1952 filed subdivision map. So the Harvey Bagshaw lot is the majority of the Hausman property, with that Lot 25. That covenant that Mike Walsh is referencing is a private covenant that is referenced in a deed that Michael Hausman has from his title work from when he purchased the property from October 31st of 1950 between Harvey Bagshaw and Clarence Winter for Lot 25 of the property of that subdivision. And it does mention something about poultry, but it's an antiquated, it's an antiquated covenant in that it also says that only Caucasian people are allowed to purchase this property. To the extent that number, what is it? It's number, yes, number 6. No part of said parcel, lots, or premises shall ever be occupied or sold, conveyed, leased, rented, or given to other than members of the Caucasian race, except that other members of the Caucasian race may be employed as servants in that capacity maintained on the premises. I think we've moved on from many of these things over the past 50-plus years. It also said that this was the intention of the party of the first, being the developer, to apply these restrictions as herein set forth to all lots of the development which were conveyed in this part.
Excuse me just a minute there.
Yes.
Michael, does this indenture apply to just that house or to the houses in the subdivision?
Houses in the subdivision.
So does your client have a garage or a basement in their house?
Not that, no.
Because it states here,
Answer's no.
there's got to be houses over there that have basements and garages, yes?
I don't know. We have to check.
Okay. It states here, no trailer, barn, basement, or tent shall be permitted on the property, no garage erected upon said lot shall at any time be used as residence temporarily or permanently, nor shall any structure of a temporary character be used as a residence except as permitted. So, I mean, there's stuff in here that,
These were filed before the map of the subdivision was filed, actually, because this deed was filed in 1950, but the subdivision map itself wasn't filed until 1952. So,
Which is not unusual, it's the same tract of land, just, that's an easy answer.
nonetheless, additional deeds had been filed post that initial deed for Lot 25, and those covenants did not follow through with those following deeds. Mr. Hausman purchased the property in 2018, I believe. We did provide what was required of us in as far as a deed showing that the meets and bounds of the subject parcel are legally his. And we also provided the road abandonments that were recently done by Kieran Pape Murphy, his attorney, who did handle those road abandonments legally. Thus providing for additional space, which all that they really provided for was additional buffer area on the property setbacks from the road. However, we would have been entitled to the pre-existing non-conforming setbacks of the existing residence, which you can see from our site plan, we are really not exceeding from what was previously there. Only the deck would be exceeding those setbacks from the prior residence. So I just wanted to submit those items for the record for the attorneys to review.
Michael Hausman, homeowner. I just wanted to talk to the nature of the community subdivision. A few of you came out to see the property, so you know what I'm talking about. A bunch of maps were shown. There really are only, I think, 6 houses. Although a lot of what you saw in that original survey has all been gone to I think, Suffolk County. So there are no houses, it's just all open land. Directly across from us, on the other side of Pearson Road, is Suffolk County Park. There's no house there. From our house, we can only see one other house, actually a little bit of Candace's roof, and another house that was just built across the street that is 2 stories tall, and is higher than our house will be because it's kind of up on a hill. But basically, it's true, we have the largest property. I'm very, happy to have this property. It's beautiful. Most of it is wetlands. We're at the end of the world. We're at the end of the road. I don't feel like our house will even be seen by the other houses. We're planning on planting a buffer so that there'll be plenty of privacy. So as far as the characteristic of this neighborhood, it is changing because they just built a house across the street, modern house, and we are also there's only one other family on the street. They're not even the homeowners, they rent. They're the only other family that live full-time in this area. We live full-time here, and it's our kind of dream forever property. And we have a house that's, the wind blows through it, the rain comes through it, it's not FEMA compliant, and we have children and grandchildren hopefully on the way that we would like to have come and stay with us. And the house is raised because of FEMA restrictions. It's really a 3-bedroom house with an office, so hardly extravagant. This building, the garage is for, storage. We have jet ski and we have lawnmowers and we have things that we need to store, and we can put the cars in there in the bad weather. So I don't think it's at all over the top, and it really is completely on its own. I mean, it's at the end of the road, and no one has to come past it. There's nowhere to go if you go past it. There's still access to the beach. I'm not sure what he's referring to as far as this idea that you could walk all the way down Pearson Road. I mean, that's all wetlands and drainage ditches now, and there's a property here. So this, I mean, you can't, this is Pearson here. I mean, you'd have to have waders to get the bushwhack your way. There's no road. It's a paper road. So the fact that we were able to have both sides abandoned because we own both sides, you can't do anything with that anyway. And there's a beach here, which is part of the Suffolk County Park, and that everybody has access to that. And there's plenty of road to get to that. And that's basically like in front of our property. So we're not restricting access to anything. I mean, you can see from here, there's no one around us. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Candace Huffine. I live at 20 Pearson. This letter is, they will have since I submitted today. Okay, great. And I wasn't going to take up your time with this, but there are some key elements here that I think are important that you hear from me, especially with this last edition of what the community is like, and also in regards of them being the only full-time owners. I think all of it, I'm going to bring us back now into the conservation of the land, which I think is what we're all here for today. I will attempt to summarize. It's not long anyway. I want to just reintroduce myself. I'm Candace Huffine, the owner of 20 Pearson Road. I reside with my fiance, Shelley Lynch Sparks, and our 2 dogs. Since we last saw each other in January, we have become proud small business owners in the neighboring town of West Hampton Beach, and we are full-time residents of Flanders and are very excited about our future in the town of Southampton. It's clear we're here today because we all want promising futures and what's best for our homes and for our dreams to come true. However, in the regards of the application of 24 Pearson Road, I find it imperative that we look slightly backwards before we look forward. I recalled in our January 25th hearing that Mr. Shea, in regards to another case, mentioned how he did not feel comfortable granting permits for new development based on the previous accruement of violations on the said property. This stuck with me as I became aware of how important it is to shed light on some of the unlawful violations of 24 Pearson before you proceed with entrusting such a precious parcel with someone who historically has not treated it as such. In my time neighboring Mr. Houseman, he has kept a storage container ship in your wetland barrier for 5 years. He's cut and dumped in the prohibited area and protected nature preserve on the other side of Fanning Road, which the town of Southampton owns. He's built an unpermitted chicken coop and is raising unpermitted livestock. And the reason why we mention the livestock is very important to you guys. The presence kills surrounding wetlands because of the high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus in their manure. All of this runoff that runs into your wetlands will erode them and essentially kill them. So it's something to think about. He's ripped up the ground and grass in your wetland buffer to lay an unpermitted stone patio. He's raised the land in front of the yard to plant corn, which resulted in obvious flooding of my yard. This is also the space in which he'll be putting the septic, which I know we haven't talked about flooding tonight. It was a huge topic of conversation on the 25th. Ironically enough, if you remember, it was pouring down rain that night. I came home to that area flooded. It is a flooding area, which he continues to find imperative to raise. And even as we stand here today, he has fenced out the entire neighborhood from accessing the public park space on Pearson Road, which is also owned by you, the town of Southampton. So all of this access he speaks of, the public park space in which he referenced, we can't access because he's fenced off with chicken wire. This information is valuable to the current application because in my experience, the Housemans display little respect for the surrounding community and the land in which they reside on. This is why I continue to disapprove of the proposed application, its blatant overdevelopment of the land, the home size, its placement, its grade changes, and the incoming fill, as it will result in unsafe and unlawful living conditions for my property. I do understand that this is strictly a conservation-focused town hall, but I ask that you look closer at the size of this home in direct correlation to its footprint, and the materials needed to build it. This home is close to 40 feet high. 3 stacked levels of over 10 feet each, taking away all light and sky conservation for those of us at the tip of this really beautiful peninsula. Not to mention, if the footprint were smaller, certainly more requirements of the wetland buffers can be and would be met easily, and the matter of the concerning fill would reduce. If this plan is approved, the future of the wetlands will surely be compromised irreparably, and likely the pattern of asking for forgiveness but not permission by Mr. Houseman will continue. Thank you for your time and consideration and protection of the town that we love to call home. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to speak on this application?
Motion to adjourn.
We need to adjourn this. How much time do you need to review?
May date. That would be helpful.
May 24th. Tenth's got a lot on it.
May 10th, there's 4.
Actually, the 24th is allowed.
Well, he's gonna get adjourned again, probably.
On the 24th,
On the 10th,
on the 10th.
although I don't know.
I could do the 10th.
You do the 10th? Let's do the 10th. Daphne, we talked about 2 weeks, let's make
The
that a
indenture.
month.
You can keep that?
I'm gonna keep it.
We need some more
You'll
time
share
to
it, though,
review
if
all
we
these
posted.
documents we just submitted.
You have a cut.
Not sure how that's really relevant, but
Well, to review documents, they may not be relevant, but they gotta be reviewed.
May 10th?
Sure.
We need to hire a lawyer? I mean, I bought the property and we have the deeds and we have a tax map and we own the property and I'm trying to prove that I own the property and I know when I bought the property that,
No, we're not asking you to do any of that, but we got all these documents submitted.
but it
that-
seems like it's turning into a trial over legal issues. I mean, I mean, the pool, I bought the house, there's a C of O, I had a list of all the permits. I know that she maybe did things the wrong way, but she corrected everything and paid all the fines.
I think it's premature to think about hiring an attorney until at least Kelly can review what's
mean,
been presented.
I could look over everything and for the next hearing, April 26th.
So I guess, okay, so I guess I'm trying to get a sense of what's gonna be different next, like, what are we gonna,
The only thing.
have we
you-
accomplished
well,
anything?
the only-
What's gonna happen next
The only
time?
thing you should concentrate on are the things that we discussed
Okay.
in terms of the buffer.
And as far as the legal stuff?
At this particular time, I mean, I don't know, I shouldn't open my mouth, I'm not an
Because
attorney.
I guess what I'm afraid of happening is that if we come back in a month, and there are issues that further issues we have to deal with, and if I have a lawyer, then they could maybe preemptively, I mean, I don't know, like,
I mean, honestly, I have to look over everything, so I don't know right now.
can we talk, is it possible to have communication before a month? So that we can be prepared to, because it seems like a lot of it is.
She just
No, I
said she can
we
do
can
it in 2
do the
weeks.
next,
Oh,
April
fantastic,
26th. Yeah,
thank
I'll
you.
look over everything, so
All
you
right,
don't have to.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, concentrate on the changes to the buffer that you were willing to make.
We're gonna get
The
that
things
done
that
right away.
actually relate directly to chapter 325's review of the property and some of the stuff about ownership and easements and things like that may turn out to be civil issues that we don't need to necessarily deal with in our
Thank you,
decision.
I understand, okay.
Okay, so
So,
can
Okay,
I
so we're,
move to adjourn to April 26th?
okay.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Everyone's paper.
Yeah, well, I think it's.
Yeah, give me your other stuff. Just this stuff.
I'm gonna hang on to some of this for a minute.
Hang on to as much as you like, I got enough copies in here. Wallpaper in the chapel.
I didn't get this.
Good night.
Okay. You're not gonna give me more later in like 10 minutes, are you, Jason?
Advisory report, reports for the planning board, subdivision map of 200 North McGee Street.
This is a pending subdivision for track on North McGee Street in Hamatucca. There are several recommended comments. First is that the track which 2-lot subdivision approval is being sought is presently developed into legally existing single-family residences. It abuts a large block of forested land to the east, which has been preserved by the town. These woodlands once extended into the subject property, but were in large part cleared and removed between 1994 and 2001, leaving remnants of these woods along the southerly portion of proposed Lot 2. Second, as the subdivision does not increase residential density, the Conservation Board has no significant objections to the proposal. Thirdly, consistent with the Conservation Board's August 11, 2021 advisory report, a conservation easement needs to be established over the remaining woodlands on Lot 2, as this wooded area contains slopes in excess of 15% and builds upon a protected natural area and essential wildlife movement corridor on the abutting Suffolk County Water Authority property to the south. Establishment of the easement will also help to safeguard the existing public well pump station.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Francis E. Mulvey subdivision.
This is a subdivision that's in the pre-application stage for a wooded tract at Percy Avenue in West Hampton. The first comment indicates that the subdivision would affect the forested tract and county mapped watershed lands for Beaver Dam Creek. These woods are, of course, vital to protect the water quality and replenishing groundwater. They also aid in cleaning the air through carbon sequestration and help to sustain local floral and faunal biodiversity. Second, clearance standards should thus be adhered to, with allowable site disturbance limited to the existing clearing on Lot 1 and 50% of Lot 2. Thirdly, track is located within 1.5 miles of documented summer occurrence, federally endangered northern long-eared bat. As such, the applicant needs to contact the DEC for guidance on tree removal and any other habitat protection measures that need to be adhered to. Any special requirements as established by the DEC need to be noticed on the subdivision map.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Alec Hufnagel.
This is a subdivision application that's in pre-application stage for a property at Little Noack Path in the hamlet of Watermill. There are several recommended comments. First is that as the forested land, which will be impacted by the proposed subdivision, is partially cleared and developed and located in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, the entirety of site disturbance associated with the shed, garden, pool equipment, and access paths needs to be shown in the survey together with revised clearing calculations. Second, if the clearing on proposed Lot 1 exceeds the allowable limit as per section 330-67, the applicant should be required to reclaim and revegetate a sufficient amount of area to bring the lot into compliance. Thirdly, the required clearance standard for proposed Lot 2 needs to be noted on the subdivision map. 4, in order to preserve community character and scenic corridor along the adjacent roads, the map needs to be revised to provide for conservation easements extending 25 feet from Little Noack Path and 50 feet from Noack Path. 5, the driveway and fence encroachments along the northerly lot lines need to be addressed. 6, the survey needs to identify the existing fence heights and note whether the fence lines will need to be modified to comply with section 330-109A, subsections 1, 2, and 3. 7, to prevent interference with wildlife movement and avoid risk of wildlife injury, all fence lines should be located outside of natural vegetation areas which are being slated for protection to comply with section 330-67.
Motion to send those comments to the planning board.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? For the ZBA, Barbara Rosenthal.
This pending application for property line pyramid and non-conforming use expansion variances is being sought for a property at Neds Place in Flanders. The property fronts on Reeves Bay, contains town regulated tidal and brackish wetlands. It also abuts county preserved land and lies within the limit of moderate wave action. Thus, VE building standards need to be adhered to. The second advisory comment provides some history in terms of a Conservation Board permit that was recently issued to allow for demolition and replacement of the hurricane-damaged waterside dwelling, as well as renovation of a second dwelling and construction of elevated decks with a new IEA to be installed. The approved survey is referenced. Thirdly, it's indicated that the survey that's been submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals is consistent with the survey that was approved by this board. And as is customary, the last comment indicates that the separate zoning variance issuance criteria have not been reviewed as part of this advisory report.
Motion to send these comments to the ZBA?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Gerard and Ellen Perino.
This pending variance application, which seeks relief from the pyramid law, relates to a property in Shinnecock Shores on Benita Road in East Quogue. The premises fronts on a bulkheaded canal whose waters are regulated as tidal wetlands. The lot also lies within the town's high priority water quality improvement zone. Second, it's indicated that the planned second-story residential addition as depicted on the survey that was submitted to the zoning board is eligible for a letter of non-jurisdiction pursuant to Chapter 325. However, it's indicated that there are unauthorized seaside patios on the property that need to be legalized by filing a Conservation Board wetland permit application. Last comment indicates that the separate variance criteria set forth in the town building and zoning code have not been considered as part of this advisory report.
Motion to send these comments?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? HB Beach House.
This is a variance application that's been submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a property at 23A Oakhurst Road in Hampton Bays. The first comment indicates that the property has frontage on the Great Peconic Bay, contains town and state regulated tidal wetlands. Second, some history is provided with regards to a letter of non-jurisdiction that had been issued pursuant to Chapter 325 for a fence line. Thirdly, it's indicated that the planned second floor deck, as shown on the survey filed with the zoning board, is also eligible for a letter of non-jurisdiction. Lastly, it's indicated that this board has not reviewed the separate zoning variance criteria as set forth in the building and zoning code.
Move to send the comments?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Administrative wetland permits are in your packets. Resolution of conditional approval, A 02-1081, 658 Flying Point LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to 658 Flying Point LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 02-3003, 46 Oakhurst Road LLC. This is postponed until April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26th.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 02-2028, Denise Sucklich. Also postponed to April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 02-2070, Laura McKenzie. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolve that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Laura McKenzie. Let's see, okay, I got these mixed up. Yes, Laura McKenzie, for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 02-2081, 4519 Noyak LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit will be granted to 4519 Noyak LLC for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth herein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022087 Linda Perillo, postponed until April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26, 2023.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review of secret determination. A 021076 Nicholas Christopher and Penelope Christopher, postponed until April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022012 Duretti Hoopa, postponed until April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022019 Doreen Grigo.
This application relates to residentially developed property on a private right-of-way in the Hamlet of Hampton Bays. Property has frontage on the Shinnecock Canal and Apes Cove. The application has been filed in order to gain this board's approval to construct a swimming pool and pool patio, as well as to install the required pool enclosure fence, equipment, and dry well. The property is encumbered by an existing covenanted wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer that needs to be restored as well. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated April 10, 2023. The report makes certain recommendations in terms of wetland impact mitigative measures, all of which the applicant has agreed to. As such, there is sufficient information on record to render a decision on this application. Accordingly, recommending that the public hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022054 Paul Bazick and Lisa Gallo.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property on Wellers Drive in Sag Harbor. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated February 27, 2023. The application has been made in order to legalize or rectify various unauthorized improvements, to expand the existing home, to address accessory improvements on the property, and to look to bring the property into compliance with an existing covenanted buffer, the wetland permit issuance standards, and the Aquifer Protection Overlay District clearance standards. The applicant has requested that a public hearing be held in order to provide full opportunity to present additional information. So there is a resolution before you to schedule a hearing.
Motion to schedule a public hearing for May 24th.
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby schedules the public hearing for May 24th, 2023, and the notice of public hearing be published in the town designated newspaper pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8C of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022054 Paul Bazick.
No,
we
you
just
said
did
no.
that. A 022082 Erlinda Bildner. This is postponed to April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023008 Michael Sonnenfeld.
This application relates to a property on Mecox Road in Hamlet Bridge, Hampton. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated April 6, 2023. The landowner is seeking this board's approval for residential redevelopment of the property. There are various issues that need to be addressed with regards to activities that are not compliant with an existing covenanted buffer that was established by this board. Portions of the property also need to be reclaimed and restored to natural vegetation. The applicant has requested that a public hearing be scheduled.
Motion to schedule a public hearing for May 24th.
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby schedules the public hearing for May 24th, 2023, and that a notice of public hearing be published in the town designated newspaper pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8C of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A023010 Margot Carr and Dana Robinson.
This application relates to a residentially developed property in Harrison Terrace in East Quogue. There is a preliminary advisory report dated March 27, 2023. The application was filed to legalize various accessory improvements at the property that were authorized by a building permit, but in releasing that building permit, building division erred in not referring the landowner to my office to seek a wetlands permit. The activities are generally compliant with the wetland construction setbacks required by Chapter 325. The property is also separated from the approximate wetlands by another residentially developed lot. As such, the March 27, 2023 advisory report recommends that the hearing requirement for this application be waived.
Motion to waive public hearing.
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A023018 Linda Corso and Clifford Dean Corso.
This application relates to a residentially developed property at Meadow Pond Lane in the hamlet of Shinnecock Hills, within an area where the majority of the property has been armored by bulkheading or riprap. The applicant is seeking this board's approval in order to construct a swimming pool. There are some issues that need to be addressed in terms of non-compliant activities, which are described by the April 6, 2023 advisory report. The applicant has agreed to address the outstanding issues. So at this time, there is sufficient information to make a determination on the application. Accordingly, the advisory report recommends that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Code Interpretation Amendment A02209591 Cobb Isle is postponed until April 26th.
Motion to postpone to April 26th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?